Hello. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This webinar series, Scientific Publishing in the Digital Age, is brought to you by IES Research, a team that provides research publication with an engaging voice through the adaptation of the IES storyboard of Big Why, and What. We design visuals and animations to support your research findings, maximize the understanding of the discoveries, and share your story globally to improve research visibility and increase scholarly engagement. My name is Iris Xu, and I'm your host for the day. This is actually the second session of the webinar series, and we're happy to have Dr. Wang Wei-Fu as our speaker. Dr. Wang is the chief consultant of IES Research, and before his joining of IES Research, he used to work for Thomson Reuters for the business of IP and science with decades of experience in scholarly communication. So Dr. Wang will share us today about the Widen Your Readership Through Research Storytelling. And after Dr. Wang's sharing, we will have the remaining time for Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions throughout the session by simply using the Q&A option located at the bottom center of your Zoom interface. Should anyone joining from our YouTube channel, you may type your questions at the chat as well. Now, since we have quite a big group today, so probably let me start by asking who or in what role you are currently with. So I'm going to have a poll here, and we will ask you, what's your role? So let me have this poll, and please feel free to tell us more about you. So you are now should be able to watch the poll, and we already have some answers showing on my screen here. So actually you can choose multiple options because I'm sure that some of you has multiple roles. So please tell us more about you so we can try to position our presentation and sharing better for your needs. Now we have around 70%, nearly 80% already voting. So around 46% of you are a student, 36% you are a researcher, and 11% you are from the library field, and we have 3% who represent the publisher, and there are 12% who are others. And because we don't have the option to let you type in what others' role are, so I would simply leave it as it is. So I think that will give us a better picture about the where you come from, what's your background. And as you can see, I'm not sharing the results. So probably you can have a bigger picture, and so is Dr. Wang. So without further ado, let me move the ground to Dr. Wang to begin our today's section. Dr. Wang, or yours?
Thanks, Iris. I guess that was a fun part of it to see the polling. And I guess where should I put myself? Others, maybe, yeah. But I was a student. I was a researcher. I never be a publisher. A librarian, I guess, when I was a kid, I actually joined as a librarian, but I thought that's the easiest job to do. So I ended up as a librarian when I was a primary school student. Well, anyway, welcome to this section. And today's title is Widen Your Readership Through Research Storytelling. My name is Wei-Fu Wang, and I'm based in Singapore. Been kind of stuck in this island for a while, so looking forward to meet up with some of you soon in the region. But definitely it's still important for everyone to stay, safe and social distancing and those kind of thing. But today, I thought it's quite important that we continue with the section about how to improve scholarly communication, how to improve research publishing. And thanks for joining because I know some of you joined the previous section by Stephanie from Science Open, and you probably learned a little bit about metadata, which is so important that for researchers to make sure that you publish in those journals that have a good collection of metadata because it helps to improve visibility. And today I would like to continue that whole series by looking at how we could increase the readership. And the other thing I'm going to do today is a bit different is that I'm not going to keep, presenting throughout. I'll be like asking questions. So there'll be a series of questions. And so kind of like I'm asking question and answering myself. I know it sounds strange, but I hope it's fun enough to keep your attention. So let's shoot first question. And what's the first question? Now, why do we need to widen the readership for scientific publication? Does it sound like a good question? Well, I think to some people, it probably this is a no-brainer. But then again, if you think about if you are involved in a library, in fact, this is an interesting thing where I ever went to Taiwan and meet up with a librarian. She was complaining to me and say that, well, there's so much pressure to improve the usage of scientific publication. Library, you subscribe journals and those kind of database, and the usage is always low. So she was under tremendous pressure, and one day she was sharing with us and saying that, you know what, we should put up comic, Marvel comic. The usage will definitely goes up. Now the point here is interesting because scientific journal is not something like easily read by anybody, and no one, if you go to the public library, you don't see people walk into the reference section, pick out any book from there. A matter of fact, the reference section is always the most quiet one, good place for a nap, right? But if you go to the novels and all the kind of other books there, you see it's kind of crowded with kids. Everybody borrow a book, the same thing here. Do you I mean, it's no longer a no-brainer question. In fact, if you find that to widen readership for scientific publication is challenging. But why do we need to do that? Well, here are the answer. Firstly is that science that never been cited, even you publish after 10 years. This is based on the article published by Nature on the 13th December 2017. And since then, there's a lot of actually people sharing something similar. In fact, we did an analysis of some of the paper based on citation index like Web of Science and Scopus. Pretty much, we see the consistent phenomena here and say that there are certain discipline, the subject, after they publish their papers, even after like 5 years and beyond, you still get zero citation. And some of the cases, they even publish in high impact factor journal. And that is really scary because it's so difficult to get your paper accepted in top journal and yet nobody read your paper. That can be very sad, right? So it is happening. The other thing is open access. I think it's nothing new to most of you. I mean, just in case some of you are not familiar, is what is open access. Open access is basically means that when you get your paper published, it can be accessed by anybody for free. Currently some of the database, your library budget had to pay for it, and then you go to the library can access to it or read those articles. But for open access, no. And a matter of fact, there are different type of open access. You have gold, hybrid, green, bronze, and so on and so forth. I probably won't have the time to explain that in detail today, but it is become important because it's driven by the funder. A lot of funder in the world, particularly in the US, in the Europe, especially like in the Europe, they have this initiative called Plan S. What it means is that starting from this year, Most of the research, in fact, all the research are funded by them in Europe, you had to publish in open access. Be more specific, Go and hybrid. So the whole idea here is that you want the paper to be accessible by third world country. I mean, not everybody in the world are fortunate enough to have an access to those database. Although I know some publishers have been very helpful with that, but then again, it's still quite costly to be able to access to it. So the whole idea of open access basically changing the business model. So instead of the library budget paying for it, it becoming the researcher have to pay for it, and what they call it is the APC, article processing charge. Now, of course, some people agree, some people don't agree. Researchers say, "Gee, I need to pay for it now to publish," and librarian probably will say that, that's good. I don't need to manage the budget. Of course, there's always a concern that if everything go open access, then what's the role of the librarian? Well, I wouldn't be able to debate about that today, but definitely open access is become a trend. More than 50 to 60% of the world's scientific publications are now in open access. So whether you agree or disagree, that's the trend. And the third thing is that research now is trying to align with impact, so social impact, and a lot of the research funder nowadays, they would like to make alignment with United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, the SDG. In fact, you look at the bottom right corner, that picture is basically showcase a research publication that trying to align with SDG. Why we want to do that? Because that is one way to define research impact. And it's becoming more important because funders asking for it. And even government is looking that as one of the requirement, because a lot of research funding come from public funding. And you can't be saying that, you use up $1 million of public money to create publication. That doesn't make sense. You have to be able to define what is the impact of it. And SDG is the way to go. So you can see that the audience of your research is a lot more wider now. You can't be, just looking at your own domain expert, looking at the paper that they understand what you're doing. Interestingly, I myself doing research in polymer, and I can't be just write a paper about polymer. Of course, polymer, some of you are familiar with that, but if I tell you that I'm doing research on polymer with Raman spectroscopy, you probably start scratching your head and say, what is Raman spectroscopy? So we know that PhD itself is very specialized, it's very narrow, and it's time for us to learn how to widen it. But then how to improve that, the readership in our digital age? Now, I can't specifically mention digital age because when you think about improving readership in the old day, I still remember this vividly. When I got my paper first published, I got the preprint, and I went around past the preprint to my colleague. I said, "Hey, I got a paper." They say, "Yeah, congratulations." I said, "Give you one copy," and he was staring at me and say, "For what? I'm not going to read your paper." So you can think about it and say that, you can't be like passing the physical copy around and expect people to read it, right? I mean, they might take it and wrap peanut, or wrap something else. So in the digital age, we don't do that. We use something more fancy. So what would be the solution? Well, I think firstly, like we learned from Stephanie the other day, we have to make sure that we publish paper in a good journal. I know some of you are familiar with Journal Citation Report, which is called JCR. JCR, basically, it provides you the impact factor of all the top journal. And I think that was almost like a benchmark. Before you start publishing, you go to JCR, you search and try to find the best subject and relevant subject and the best impact factor to publish. Of course, there are also some people worry about predatory publishers and so on, and and the bill list and stuff like that, which I think I wouldn't mention that too much here. But one thing you need to be sure, and I'm pretty much sure that you learned from Stephanie from the previous section, you have to check, make sure the journal have collecting or indexing metadata sufficiently. Because in today's world, in so-called the digital age, researchers, they search for your paper not by going to the library, but straight away using Google search. I know librarians don't like it in the early day, but I guess you can't beat them now, right? So you have to really adopt Google search because everybody go Google search. You buy nasi biryani, also Google search. You find paper, also Google search. You want to know about vaccine, you also Google search. So the same thing here, that want to make sure you find your paper, you be sure that you publish in a good journal with better metadata index. That's one thing. But again, does not necessarily mean that people will find your paper. The other thing is really change the mindset of yourself, particularly for young researcher. I think this is a good time for you joining in and learn about something what we call publish, promote, or perish. I think some of you heard about publish or perish a lot. That actually the early mindset that as a researcher you had to publish paper, as many paper as you can. So if they start piling up with paper and say, oh, I have like 20 paper, I have 50 paper. But question is that how many people read your paper? And you got to know that at the end of the day, your H index, your citation, your impact factor, they're all based on number of citation. And the funny thing is that if people don't read your paper, there's nobody going to cite your paper. So you have to firstly make sure people read your paper. So increasing the readership is important. And how to do that? Well, you have to make it searchable and discoverable, like mentioned in the point number 1. The second thing is that you just have to promote. I know researchers hate to say promoting your work because you say my work is good enough, people will find me. I agree with that if you're Einstein. If you're Einstein, they'll find you. I remember this interesting story. I met up with one Nobel laureate in Singapore when he was a consultant in one of the government agency here. I remember that we set a meeting and goodness, he agreed to meet up with us. I was like, wow, that's cool, man. Nobel laureate. And I introduced myself from Thomson Reuters, so one of the famous company and dealing with Web of Science. So when we first met, he asked me and say, where are you from? I say, well, I'm from a company, doing this Web of Science thing. And he was saying, oh, I know this Dr. Eugene Garfield citation index, right? Yeah, say yes, right. And he stared at me a little bit and said that, well, you know what? Actually, I don't really care about that. Or like, yeah, that's true. You're Nobel laureate. Do you care? Well, if you're Nobel laureate, you probably don't care. But if you're not, I think you better care, right? So how to make sure you got more citation? Well, publish or perish probably is one way, but you can't keep publishing and nobody reading, right? So at some point you have to promote your work. Otherwise, you'll perish as well. Now, when it comes to promoting your work, the third thing is that it's no longer as simple as writing manuscript. The style of writing manuscript is like report writing. So you have to think about how to change your writing style. And this is where we find researchers have a biggest barrier. When you think about writing, in most of the time, we are not writing to impress people. We have to write to express. And as a researcher, I think you have to express your passion, your work a lot more to get people excited about your work as well. So you have to know how to write headlines, long tail keyword. What's long tail keyword? Some of you like thinking about long tail is the dinosaur long tail. Well, to some extent, it's a long tail from the dinosaur. But keyword usually, I think, if you write manuscript, you know keyword probably like 1 or 2 words. But when we talk about long tail, we talk about a bunch of words. So it's a phrases. Why we talk about long tail keyword? Well, imagine you Google search. Well, if you say vaccine, you type in vaccine, you get a whole bunch of rubbish because it's not going to tell you a lot, you see. But you say COVID-19 vaccine, probably you get a little bit more thing. And if you say COVID-19 vaccine with mRNA technology, then you think that thing is narrowed down. So the point of long tail keyword is basically to help you to sharpen it. And you as a researcher need to be familiarized with that in writing headline, because your intention is to attract people to look at your paper. That's why a good manuscript need to come along with a good title, because title is another form of a long tail keyword. Well, I know it's so far I'm not been very encouraging, right? Everything sounds hard, and it probably even changes some of your way of working. So you probably start and asking me some shortcut ideas. Say, well, can you post publication at ResearchGate? It's easy, right? Because if I publish a paper, I just shoot up in the ResearchGate. That should be, done deal. No, why you need to bother so much with all this research outreach and stuff like that? Well, firstly, you need to know that if you're posting your full stack in ResearchGate, there could be some infringement of copyright. Because if you publish in a non-open access journal, the copyright ownership is owned by the publishers. So in fact, this is a very common issue when people start posting their full stack there in the ResearchGate. And the other thing is that actually, posting is a passive promotion. Like billboard. If you're putting a billboard along the highway, how quickly will you look at the billboard? You know, I think, for example, like someone who's driving in let's say like in Malaysia, you drive in the north-south highway with a big billboard, you probably wouldn't look at it, for more than what, 2 seconds or 1 second, depending how fast you're driving, right? 110 kilometer per hour, for example. So that retention, that attention level is very short, and it's just simply posting. So you had to, in fact, today you will see that a lot of people talking about digital marketing, social media marketing, content marketing. What it basically means here is that you use social media to send snippet, short story, short video, something that less than a minute, and it is sent directly to a targeted audience. So you're not kind of like broadcasting, not like radio, not like TV, not like billboard. And of course, it runs 24/7. It go global. It's not like regional or local. And the other thing is very important is that it provides the online footprint. So what is this so-called online footprint? Well, some of you are familiar with Amazon.com, right? You go Amazon.com, you do shopping, or some of you familiar with like Lazada or Shopee. Really depends which part of the world you are in, But Amazon.com, I guess everyone know, it's basically means that you go shopping, they know what you're doing, and very soon they come back to you and say, "Hey, guy, do you want to buy a watch? Because it seems like you are looking for a watch for the last few days." And suddenly your computer fill up with all the uh, advert from the watch company. How they know you? Well, because you left behind the digital footprint when you turn on your computer, when you use your smartphone. Now, some people say that, how can I avoid that? Well, the best way not to leave behind a online footprint is that just don't use phone then, don't use computer. That's probably the best way. But the moment you use it, you turn it on, so you do leave behind the footprint. Somehow they'll be able to find you. So that the same thing here. If you do the social media promotion of your work, you actually know who are reading your paper, from which country, what demography, what kind of researchers, from which university. And this is actually making it a lot more precise for you to plan for your research communication. And in fact, you think about it, if you have this set of data go along with your citation data, that is a very powerful tool for you to plan how to position your research work, to find more collaboration, to find more commercialization, and not to mention eventually you get more citation. So was it proven that online promotion would help to widen academic readership? Well, definitely the answer is yes. In fact, we, IES Research, has been doing quite a few projects for the last couple of years with university. And consistently, we see that the readership, particularly for the number of download of the scientific paper, has gone up 30%. Now, 30% means that it could be gets high at 50%. Sometimes it could be even much bigger, and sometimes it's like 21%. So that is based on not only our data, we also seen some published paper mention that as well. The other interesting thing is that open access actually promote collaboration. And that is something that I think been shared in some article, that because using social media, you engage with a lot more researchers overseas globally. Now, think about it, promoting research is nothing new, okay? I mean, if some of you see your supervisor or your professors, once a while travel overseas to attend conferences, it's exactly the same thing. The only difference is that, of course, now pandemic you are restricted by that. But in the before pandemic, most of the time you could see that researcher they had to attend conference. In fact, some research student you need to join the conference with a poster. So all this is promotion. Of course, you don't call promotion. I know, promotion doesn't sound very fancy. You want to call it conference. Well, conference sound a lot more professional, but it's still promotion, right? So the whole idea is that to reach out to the wider audience, researchers, and seek for collaboration, comment, feedback, and so on. This is what we call research exchange, or sometimes we call scholarly communication. Now, the other thing that interesting is that, if you promote your work, particularly if open access, you get a lot more attention from non-academic and the media. And you can see the chart on the bottom right corner here. You can see that the paper that is actually got a lot media mention, you should get more citation eventually. Now, one thing you need to take note is that for the point 2 and 3, I do mention about open access because when you promote your work, which is not open access, there's a little bit of, not really an issue, but there's a little bit of less seamless process. What happens is that if you promote your work and you're not public in open access, so basically in the social media, you send out some teaser, some like video and stuff like that, get people excited about it. So it's kind of like a movie teaser. So if I borrow the movie teaser as a metaphor, let's say you send out your Star Wars movie teaser, and you find that movie is exciting, so you want to click on, you want to look for the movie. Well, where to find the movie? Well, you either you have to subscribe it or you have to download illegally or wherever you want to find it, you see. But in the so-called content marketing for science, what we usually do is that the teaser will promote the DOI of the paper. Not sure you know what's DOI. Just in case you do not know what's DOI, is that it basically is a link to the full text. Now, if you click on the DOI, the link, if it is an open access, then you can see the full text immediately. So it's seamless. But if it is not open access, then you're like, boom, you end up with the publisher's portal. And then you have to be sure that your library subscribe that. If your library didn't subscribe it, then good luck with that. You just stuck there. So this is why funders asking researchers to submit their paper more to the open access because they don't want that whole stuck at stuck at the portal at the research publisher there, and you can't see the full text, you see. So open access is becoming more important because it's accessible, and if you promote it, you even reach out to a lot more wider audience. And in fact, it's proven by Springer Nature's one of this survey saying that a lot of the media, a lot of the corporate, a lot of the government agency, they actually reading a lot more open access. Well, thinking about it is not surprising because not every government agency subscribe scientific paper. Now, if you think about you want your work to be known by policymaker, then you better make it more accessible. So this is why if your paper become accessible to non-academic is important. Well, you probably now say that, well, okay, I understand, online promotion, but why you need to tell story, right? Is it like making your life difficult? Well, I guess you have to know that, when we, in the early day, when science is just between your own community, everybody know what is polymer, everybody know what's Raman spectroscopy within your that little community. I guess you don't really care, right? But when you think about talking to someone in social science, why you need to talk to someone in social science if you're doing science? Let's say you're in the research of, you know, vaccine about COVID-19. That's kind of like science thing. Do you want to talk about social science? Well, you have to, you see, because we all know that this whole pandemic is not about science on the vaccine alone, on health science alone, but we are also talking about social distancing, fatigue, people cannot meet each other, people, stress up, I think that whole implication is kind of like cross-disciplinary. And today's the world, you can't solve the problem by just a single science called mathematics, physics, or chemistry. In fact, if you look at vaccine alone, it is a combination of different sciences. Everything is cross-disciplinary. So you have different audience to deal with, and not to mention about people who fund you, who pay you your research money, someone who probably commercialize your ideas. So you have to be able to communicate to different audience, and this is what storytelling is all about. Now, how to define this storytelling? And let me share with you a model here. So this is a model that we use. Basically, we take an assumption here of an equation here. Let's say you're in the ideal world and you minus the reality, then you see problem, right? The ideal world, everything is perfect, but then the reality is what you see now. You have pollution, you have, pandemic. So then equal to a problem. When you have a problem, we need a solution. So let's borrow this model. And what's problem? So now you start to look at your scientific paper. In your paper, you have introduction or thesis statement. Well, some of you do not know what thesis statement. You may want to join some of my other webinar next time. But thesis statement, basically, it tells the objective of your paper, and thesis statement usually is at the bottom of your introduction. So if you write a good manuscript, make sure you have a good thesis statement. So all these are define the problem. And you have a solution. Solution will be all your data, discussion, and methodology. Now, let me put on top another frame with what we call big big why, what, and how. So why is clear, that's objective. What is what you're doing? How is your methodology? So that's simple. Now, what is big why? Big why is a big issue, that how you save the world. Now, most of the time when you write your paper, you don't say that you're trying to save the world because, take for example, you're talking about you finding a way to create more clean waters, but that is just an ideas, but it's not enough to save water issue in many other countries yet. So, but that is related. It's like one of the many, many ideas out there to save the water issue. So that's a big why. So when you write a research paper, it's always why, what, how. That's all. You don't really talk about big why. And that's quite normal. And that's why also very difficult to understand. So for the layman to understand, they'll never know what's going on. Just like when I do my research about polymer, I told my dad and mom and say that my research is about, helping to discover or to improve the material that make the aeroplane invisible in the radar. That sounds pretty much layman. But if let's say I tell my dad and mom say that, my research is using Raman spectroscopy to study the shift of frequency of, polyethylene fiber under tension, they're like, gee, stop it, don't waste your time. So research papers are always dry. So when you become famous, your PR department from a university come and talk to you and say, I want to publish that in the newspaper, in one of the top newspaper in the country. And you probably realize that the way they write is not going to be your methodology a lot, but you talk about the big why, the why thing, how your this objective can save the bigger objective of the world. And this is where you come to another problem is that you say, okay, then what happened to my abstract? I thought my abstract supposed to be easy, because abstract supposed to make people to understand my paper. That is quite true, but when you write abstract, you write a summary of the why, what, and how. And that is not very well engaging. I mean, it's good, but not engaging. And that's why recently you see some of the publishers start asking for a plain language summary or research highlight. And a lot of researchers actually confused and say, what's the difference between plain language summary and abstract? Well, plain language summary, simply it means that you need to take into account of the big why, and what. You can throw away the entire how because that's too much to mention. And this is very different from the abstract. So you need to know the difference. Because if you do not know the difference between plain language summary and abstract, you won't be able to submit that to the publisher. And for your information, this is becoming a requirement to submit a plain language summary for most of the paper that you need to submit in the future. So now it comes to the question, is it now a requirement for a researcher to storytell their discovery? Well, the answer definitely is yes. It's just a matter of how to do it, right? So I already mentioned a lot of premier publishers is already asking for plain language summary. Or some they even asking for graphical abstract. I think some of you have seen that. In fact, you can see the top left corner here, the typical graphical abstract. I know a lot of researchers find it hard to do it, and I do run some courses about graphical abstract, and usually they ask me which software to use. Well, the only software I told them you need is a piece of blank paper and start sketching. Because the whole idea of graphical abstract is mind mapping. It's conceptualizing your idea. So it's not about putting icon and infographic and making looks sophisticated, but no meaning. So I think you have to learn about conceptualizing. You have to learn about mind mapping. And the same thing, making a video abstract, it always have some guideline not to make a video that go round and round for half an hour about yourself. That's not going to work. So this to come to the next thing is that I think some of you are familiar with 3-minute thesis that kind of originated by University of Brisbane in Australia. And even recently, I know British Council, they have something similar called Fame Lab. And a lot of students are actually joining that. I know some students from Southeast Asia did quite well. I saw one from Malaysia ever got a champion. And then, in fact, in this picture, there's this student of mine. I did coaching for Singapore Management University, and she actually got into the final. It was good as well. So why people want to do elevator pitching? Because if you're talking to industrial, you're talking to funder, they're not going to listen to you for 1 hour or not even half an hour. The most they give you is really 15 minutes. That's probably the most. And so you have to figure the way out to talk about it and very concise. Now, the third thing is something we call science of science. This is something very fancy, very futuristic, but I know it's coming. Why so? Because when I was started my career in information industry, particularly like in Web of Science, we thought about the concept from Dr. Eugene Garfield about citation. And believe it or not, Dr. Eugene Garfield never know that citation will become the metric of research. It's only until when he reached his late 80, when he about to pass away, he was realizing wow, what the world have done to his citation idea, and basically people use it for evaluation, assessment, and talk about ranking, university ranking, QS ranking, PhD ranking, that sort of thing. Now, recent years, we start seeing that that's not the thing we are talking about. We are talking about impact. We are talking about SDG. So all these are become the buzzword for research, assessment, and evaluation. In fact, there are some scientists. In fact, in this case, we've seen that that people start talking about science of science. That means use science to looking at all the science being evolved and developed over the years and try to identify what are the gaps. I know a lot of universities start collaborating because they find that there's no point to repeat the same thing. You don't want to have redundant. Exactly, that's the point. In fact, you look at COVID-19 right now with the vaccine, there's a lot of competition and things go politicized with the vaccine, which is kind of sad. And in fact, that also become a problem to us at the moment. Right now, I'm doing a case study about the vaccine, about COVID-19. And in a way, I thought it's kind of helpful for some of you to know that, for example, like, the mRNA is not as new as like just came out last year. Because a lot of people feel worried and say that should I go and jab? The point here is that it is not as new as came out last year. It was actually started in 1987. At least from my searching, that is the so-called the furthest, and it could be even earlier. And the one that and mRNA is actually the technology used by Pfizer, BioNTech, and the Moderna. In fact, if you're talking the Sinovac from China, is the inactivated, and it is true that it was earlier in 1975. Now, I'm not here to say who is good or bad, but the point here is that this technology been around for a long time. So it's not like you want to make a vaccine and suddenly you can build one out from nowhere. It's based on research that done decades ago. So you need to trust that the technology is not like something just cooked up from nowhere. Um, the other one that is common in the marketplace is like AstraZeneca, Johnson and Johnson. The technology is adenovirus. It's also back in 1990. So all this give you some ideas that science actually been accumulated and built over time. But sadly, sometimes we are not very good in managing the resources. So that's what the science of science is all about. So does it make sense to promote academic journal? Well, I know some of you are publishers in the university, and my answer to you is that yes. Even though your university journal did collaborate with top publishers like Elsevier's or Springer and so on, you should understand that these publishers, they have a massive number of journal. They would be able to promote your journal. So it is yours. I think as a academic publisher, you should try to promote it to increase to a wider readership as quickly as you can. And social media is one thing you should consider. And also it helps you to attract more quality submission, because one of your challenge is that researcher may not want to publish in your journal. I know it's kind of common, and it's also very strange to say that most of the top researcher in the university, they don't publish in their own university journal. They rather publish somewhere else, of course, Nature and all these things, those commercial publishers. Um, well, you have to provide the value. I think the value is not just looking at how to make sure your journal to be accepted by JCR or website, but it's also about how to make sure that you can add value to the author. And the other thing is that as a university publisher or press, you could also help to improve the branding of the university as a research university. And that also help for more collaborative research. So it's actually very important. I think the academic publishers is going to play a far more important role than the commercial publisher in the future, especially when you see the open access evolving. Open access, when it evolves, is not very good news to a lot of commercial publishers, because suddenly their billion-dollar business is going to be disrupted. So this is something that I think to some extent can be an opportunity for the academic publishers. Now, you may be convinced by me and saying that all this is a great idea, but all this need money, right? Because the budget is tight. So what are the options? Well, I'm not asking this to create a commercial, but I'm telling you the truth that nothing is free. So if you want to be able to do all this, outreaching, impact writing, story writing, making video, well, you can do it yourself, no problem. I know there are some researchers trying to do that, but again, you have to really juggle your time. I know sometimes I talk to researchers, they've been complaining that their job is tough because they need to do lecture, they need to do administration, they need to do fundraising, they need to do research, Wow, I guess that's a lot to do, right? Now you ask them to do and make video, make podcasts, and write story. Wow. Well, I guess you have to juggle if you want to learn yourself, or you need to find some workshop. Now, we IES trying to help a lot of university researchers before, and we learned over the process. We did run some workshop. Initially, was trying to provide concept, but we realized that concept is kind of easy to tell, but it's not easy to learn. You see, it's just like swimming. Do you ever learn swimming by reading a book? You cannot, right? You cannot use Zoom to learn swimming. I'll be impressed if you know how to do swimming by learning through Zoom. I mean, you can probably do yoga, I guess. So you need to really how to practice. So we do have one workshop, like what we call learn to make, how to make plain language summary, which we will talk about the writing scale. We also talk about some tools that help you to improve your English, and like for example, something like Grammarly, Scholarly, and so on and so forth. We also help researchers through learning to make in a graphical abstract. And also I provide coaching on elevator pitching specifically. So this is something that we need practice. These are the kind of workshop that if you want to choose, you have to choose something that allow you to practice and make something out of it. It's just like you think about you joining a workshop how to make cake, right? I'm not sure you like to make cake or not, but basically if you go for a workshop to make cake, you better come up with a cake, all right? You come up without a cake, then you learn nothing. Of course, the last thing is that to outsource it, which I don't even need to explain that. Who to outsource to? Well, IES research, I guess. Now, some of you will say that, well, not everybody is, publishing paper, because like in social science, humanity, they do publish book. So can we do the same for book? The answer is yes. I know a lot of academic publishers in the university, they do make basically you publish a lot of academic books. And again, I know that these are not novel. Okay, this is not like the bestseller in the world. These are technical books. So you, in fact, even more important to do promotion. If you think that a technical book or academic book don't need to do promotion, I think you're wrong, because there are so many technical books out there. Sometimes you don't even know where to start. Of course, I know the researcher or the professor sometimes say that, hey guy, I'm your professor, buy my book. I actually bought one book from my professor, and which I don't really use a lot, but I got to buy it because he is my professor. So that's quite true, but that's okay. But that's not how to sell more book, right? So you need to have a story. So today, there's people actually make a book trailer. We do have a workshop to teach you how to make book trailer for some of the publisher if you're interested. So basically, the whole idea is to make some animation to create a story out of it. In fact, some of you need to take note that to make a story or to make an animation is not so difficult. It's how to get a story, how to make a teaser. If you watch some of the nice teaser from the movie industry, like James Bond movie, or Star Wars, and so on, you probably realize that sometimes their teaser or trailer are much more fun to watch than the actual movie, right? Because they really can make it very exciting by making the teaser or the trailer. But when you watch the movie, you're like, oh, gee, that's not so exciting. Well, the same thing here, that is the skill of making a summary. So a book summary and turn into a video or animation is a skill. And in fact, when we run such a book thriller workshop, we focus a lot more on how to do curation. You know, the word curation, I'm not sure how familiar you know about the word curation. Curation is just like, it came from the museum. When you think about, you curate a bunch of artifacts and turn into a story. When you think about, you walk into a museum, what you get? Story, experience. Why? Because they can make the stone into a story, right? If you go to a Greece museum, what you see is a whole bunch of stone and ruin, but there are a lot of story. That's what curation is about. And the same thing, you have to curate a summary of your book. Now, last one, the question is that you will say that, well, doing all the hard work, will that improve my citation or impact factor, simply by widening or increasing the readership? My answer to that is yes, and no. To some extent, yes, because if you look at this data, remember I talked about online footprint. So when you do a lot of social media outreach and promotion, you collect a lot of data. In fact, this data is based on number of paper. In fact, it's a list of paper. You look at each row, it means one paper. So from left to right is the number of reach, number of engagement, number of click, all the way to the number of download. So as you promote your papers on the social media, you can easily increase your readership or download to 30%. And if you move further, you see alt metric. Some of you may not know what's alt metric. Alt metric basically is a visibility metric. There are a couple in the marketplace. One is called alt metric, the other one called Plum X. Plum X belongs to Elsevier, is within Scopus. If you use Scopus, you probably see that. Alt metric belongs to digital science. So basically, these are the online visibility metrics. If you're not familiar with that, good to read up. Or else can join some of the workshop from us in the futures to learn more about it. So the whole idea is to measure the visibility of your publication, but they are not a replacement of citation. So it's different. So citation, as some of you know, is basically like Scopus, Web of Science, and Google Scholar, and many other actually. So so you can see that from left to right basically is the social media data to visibility data to citation. But we can assure you that most of the time that your readership can go up 30%. But whether people cite your paper or not, it all depends on your paper. In some cases, from what we understand is that citation might go up. In some cases, it become a policy, which has been good news. And in some cases, it turns into a commercialization and collaboration. So the whole outcome of readership or improved readership not necessarily have to be citation, but a lot more other good things to come along. So research performance no longer just citation alone, after all. So that's a 10 question that I've gone through. And if I put into one slide, this is probably the worst slide you ever seen because I have a whole bunch of words. Don't worry, make it easy for you. So of all the 10 questions I asked for today's topic is that basically I've gone through is that why we need to do this. I mean, to improve the readership by storytelling. And I did share with you and make you understand about online promotion. And briefly, I touched on how to storytell and how to make it happen. And of course, more importantly, I guess, is you have to know what to expect out of it. I mean, it's not a holy grail that a magical lamp and turn into a magic and your citation will goes up. It's not so simple, but it's essential. It's something that you still need to do to help to improve your visibility, your readership, and hopefully your paper, your work is good enough to get people excited about it. So thank you very much, and I hope this is useful to everyone in this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong, for the informative sharing. So obviously, a lot of questions have been raised by yourself and answered during the sharing. But we still welcome any other questions that might be raised from the audience. So for anyone who joined us on the YouTube channel, please type in your question on the chat section so that we can pick up from there. So while we are actually waiting for the questions to come in, I myself would like to ask Dr. Wang that you have already shared a lot of experiences on helping the universities and researchers to improve their visibility. Can you share with us some of the examples you have been working with in terms of, let's say, university publishers, etc.?
Sure. I mean, just to kind of do a little bit of self-boasting a little bit, and we did work with like University Malaya, the top university in the region, on Singapore Management Unity, and so on and so forth. But I want to share a few interesting one. One of them is Chinese Medical University in Taiwan, and they're actually a medical university, and they're doing Chinese medical TMC, medical, what is it?
Traditional.
Traditional Chinese TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. That's right. So it was actually quite fun because you think about the way they do research for TMC, sorry, not TMC, TCM is a little bit different from the Western medication, and actually the way they are trying to do is that to showcase more evidences and data than 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 the old day. I mean, think about the medicine is traditional Chinese medicine is always based on observation. You don't really collect a lot of data. That's kind of like the old tradition. But I think things are changing a lot. And when we do this whole project with CMU, Chinese Medical University in Taiwan, we actually trying to showcase a lot more fact and evidence in promoting their work and be able to attract a lot of interest, not because it is traditional Chinese medicine, but it's because they see a lot more data and fact out from this whole research from these people, from this expert. So that's kind of what interesting. And we also work with the China, one of the publishers. They are doing nuclear science on, and they asked us to do graphical abstract. And quite honest with you, some of the paper that came to us, it was very basic science. When you think about basic science and applied science, I think usually you can easily understand what applied science is about, see. But you think about basic science and you're talking about this universe thing and particle thing, seriously, you need a lot of imagination. And that was a hard one. But I think a lot of time we could overcome it by having conversation with the author. And we learn a lot and they also learn a lot. I guess it's a mutual learning. But my point here is that we do work with a lot of researchers. Sometimes can be very straightforward, but sometimes it can be quite challenging. Uh, but all are possible at the end. So we could turn them into video, graphical, abstract. Sometimes we even try to make it more challenging and getting them to talk about their research in 3 sentences. That's why I kind of like 3 bullet points. Hope that answered the question.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Wang. And we have some other questions in the Q&A session now. So one of that is, how can journals, not authors, but journals, to gain social presence and at the same time not to be seen like some predatory journals trying to lure authors? I think this is an interesting question.
Well, I think when you go out and showcase, I think branding, it had to be subtle, right? I know I'm not sure generally how people feel about social media. Now, I tell you, it's kind of ironic here because I myself been doing this social media thing quite a bit. But if you go into my own LinkedIn and Facebook, do you know that I actually not very active with that? I don't even want to make sure that I have a lot of friends in my LinkedIn and Facebook, that kind of thing. I think what I'm trying to say here is that when you want to show your professional presence, there's some certain level of being subtle, yet being credible, and that needs certain judgment when people observe your website closely and your social media content closely. So kind of back to the question here is that I think as a university publishers, I think you need to make sure that you have a very clear editorial criteria. I think your assistant is really the editorial. You have to make it very clear and very decisive with that. And that could be something written in your website, in your social media. The other thing is that you could increase the visibility of your author, but not one author, but by combining different research work into one, make it more meaningful. This is actually very value adding. And in fact, I recently got a project from China. There are 2 authors came to me from the same publishers, and these 2 authors are doing a research on a big area, but in a different direction. One guy is work on the basic research, and the other guy is on the application. And I think they understand that it's important for them as a publisher to showcase the success of the research from these two publishers in the same area, but coming from a different direction. Now, these two authors don't know each other, by the way, and coming from two universities. In fact, one researcher in the United States, one is in China. Now, think about this kind of thing. It's not going to be easy for publishers to begin with if you never put a thought on it. So back to the same to this question, I think as a publisher, you have to think about how to add value to your author. You have to showcase your editorial criteria. In fact, this is quite well aligned with Web of Science journal selection criteria. I mean, I work in Web of Science, I know their journal selection criteria. And I remember when I was in Web of Science, every time I visited the university, the publisher, the academic publisher asked me, hey, how to get my journal index in ISI or Web of Science? Well, those are some of the important criteria. Of course, by improving your visibility, you will definitely improve more readership and hopefully more citation. That's how you get a better impact factor eventually. So yeah, that will be the kind of journey. But I know it sounds like a long journey, right? Yeah, I understand. It's no shortcut, sorry.
Right. We have one more question. We have time for one more question. So here is one question. And Dr. Wang, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. So he was wondering if you have any particular recommendations for a think tank in publishing our research. The reason is because we don't publish our works through journals, but through websites. So what is the best way to widen the readership in your opinion?
Wow, that's cool. In fact, I have to say that this is not something I touch on it in today's presentation, but I have to tell you that it's happening already. A lot of researchers are already publishing outside our traditional channel, not journal, not book. They're really using their website. In fact, some of the researchers even have their own website, much cooler than some celebrity website. I mean, I don't have a sample here, but maybe next time I can show you. But why they do that? Because it's a lot more engaging. You can reach out to the real audience directly. So I think this is something that is happening. I know a friend of mine in University of Princeton. He's doing economy PhD, and he was telling me that despite the fact that he's studying economy in PhD in economy, but his supervisor asking him to do blogging rather than writing a paper. I'm like, wow. You see, so yes, I think that is something is already happening. As for the think tank, I can't really have something in mind very easily. But if you could write to me, I'll be happy to share some thought with some of the group chat, because we do see a few group chat in social media like Twitter and Facebook. There's a group of people sharing about sciences, even on specific topic. I think these are the area that you could join in. I think the entire idea of social media is that you have to constantly out there join some of the group and be active contributing. Social media is not a place that for you just sit down there and listen. Okay, I know somebody call themselves a submarine. Submarine, you just go in quietly and just listen. Well, you have to do more than that. If you want to be a submarine, then just a submarine. Then yeah. Hopefully that helped. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wang, for the wonderful sharing. And due to the limitation of the time, probably we will end the session here. However, we do have a following webinar, and the following webinars will be focusing on the interoperability. So how a persistent ID, like for example, ORCID, could bring the research output and author information beyond the restriction of a single platform. So stay tuned for more details to come. And thank you again for joining us today. So if you have any more questions, you may be contact us for any offline answering. And welcome to leave any of your comments in the chat box or in the YouTube channel. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to see you in the coming sessions. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.